The air in our small two-bedroom apartment was thick with the scent of stale coffee and unspoken resentment. 7 years. 7 years my husband Kolya and I had been together, and for the past 5, every waking moment had been a relentless battle against the crushing weight of our mortgage. 2 children, 6 and 4, filled our modest space with a chaotic symphony of laughter and demands, a constant reminder of both our greatest joys and our most profound struggles. We were 30, Kolya and I barely out of our 20s, yet the carefree days of youth felt like a distant, forgotten dream. The last time we'd had a real vacation was our honeymoon, a fleeting week of sun and sea before the relentless grind began. We clawed at every opportunity, every extra shift, every freelance gig, desperate to chip away at the mountain of debt that loomed over us. Kolya, a man whose shoulders seemed to carry the weight of the world, worked tirelessly. I, too, contributed in every way I could, sacrificing sleep and sanity for the elusive promise of financial freedom. We were a team, or so I believed, united against a common enemy, the bank. But lately, a new enemy had emerged, one far more insidious, cloaked in the guise of family. My mother, Elena Petrovna, a woman of formidable will and an equally formidable sense of self-preservation. She knew our situation. She knew the sacrifices we made, the dreams we deferred, the sheer exhaustion that etched itself onto our faces. She knew we were drowning, and yet, instead of offering a lifeline, she bought herself a car. Not a luxury sedan, no, but a brand new, gleaming vehicle that cost a cool 1,000,000 rubles, a sum that represented months, if not years, of our combined back-breaking labor. And add insult to injury, she genuinely believed I was in the wrong for feeling anything but joy for her. The bitterness had been simmering for weeks, a slow, toxic brew in the pit of my stomach. It finally boiled over the day she drove her new acquisition to our apartment, parking it with an almost deliberate flourish outside our window. The children, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, shrieked with delight, running to admire the shiny new toy. Kolya offered a strained smile, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that had opened between my mother and me. I, however, could not feign pleasantries. "Mama," I began, my voice tight. "It's a lovely car." "Really? But a car?" Now, she turned, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair framing a face that held not a trace of guilt, only a hint of weary exasperation. "What's wrong, Anya? Can't a woman buy herself something nice after years of hard work?" "Hard work?" I echoed, a sharp edge creeping into my tone. "Mama, we're barely making ends meet. We're working ourselves to the bone to pay off this mortgage, to give your grandchildren a stable home. You know this. You know how much we struggle." She waved a dismissive hand. "And whose fault is that, Anya? Did I force you to multiply at such a rapid pace? If it weren't for your extended maternity leaves, your own savings, and the help your mother-in-law and I gave you, you wouldn't even have a mortgage. You would have bought an apartment first and then had children. But you made your choice, didn't you? Who's to blame now? You need to take responsibility for your actions. Besides, I already helped you, if you recall. And if you think I owe you a lifetime of spoon-feeding, you are sorely mistaken." Her words, delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, cut deep. "So, you're saying you don't care about your grandchildren's quality of life?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "That you'd rather buy a car than help your own daughter and her family?" She merely shrugged, a gesture of infuriating indifference. "That's your choice too, Anya. I'm not going to beg you to see reason." "Fine," I spat, the word laced with venom. "Then you won't see them. If you care so little, then you don't deserve to be a part of their lives." Another shrug. "As you wish." She turned and walked towards her new car, leaving me standing in the doorway, tears blurring my vision. Unshakable. That was my mother. Utterly, maddeningly unshakable. I was convinced she didn't even need the car. It was a statement, a cruel, calculated jab to remind me that she could afford such luxuries while I thrashed about, scrambling for every kopeck. If my sons ever needed help, I swore, I would move heaven and earth for them. I would lay down my very bones, unlike their grandmother. Our journey to this point had been a winding, arduous path. After our wedding, Kolya and I had moved in with his mother. Her apartment was a spacious 3-bedroom, a stark contrast to my mother's cramped, walk-through 2-bedroom. Living with a mother-in-law, even a kind one, was an experience in itself, but we had a goal to save for our own place. We hadn't managed to save much, however, before I became pregnant. Good news, yes, but terribly ill-timed. My mother had not approved. She'd suggested, with chilling practicality, that I terminate the pregnancy. You'll go on maternity leave. Kolya will be the only one working. What will you save for an apartment then? Do you have any idea how much a baby needs? We argued then, a bitter exchange that left me reeling. That wasn't the reaction you expected from your own mother when you told her she was going to be a grandmother. Even Kolya's mother had reacted with more joy. Kolya, bless his heart, had promised to find a second job, enough for the baby and for our savings. I calmed down, clinging to his resolve. Our eldest son was born. I stayed home, immersed in the demanding, beautiful chaos of new motherhood. Both grandmothers were still working, so there was no one to relieve me. Kolya, true to his word, found a second job. In between caring for our baby, I tried to manage the household, a never-ending cycle of chores and exhaustion. And then we discovered I was pregnant again. This time, even Kolya's mother didn't express much enthusiasm. I understood. A house with a toddler and a newborn was a daunting prospect, but there was nothing to be done. After the news of the second pregnancy, relations with my mother-in-law grew strained. Everything we did was wrong. We were in the way. We were too loud. I even spoke to my mother about us moving in with her, but she refused. Do you want to jump from one neck to another? Your mother-in-law already took pity on you, and you started mindlessly breeding. No, thank you. I don't need such adventures. Did you manage to save anything? Excellent. I'll add to your down payment, and then you're on your own. It's time to grow up. I wasn't even offended by my mother's blunt assessment of mindlessly breeding. She would add money, we would get our own place, and we would move out from my mother-in-law's. When I announced this to Kolya and his mother, the atmosphere in the house significantly lightened. My mother-in-law said she also had some savings put aside and would contribute to our apartment. We brought our second son home to our own apartment. Kolya continued to work 2 jobs. We tried to manage renovations, pay the mortgage, and buy everything the children needed. Money vanished instantly. Then Kolya lost one of his jobs, and I had to pick up extra work. In the evenings, I would hand over the children to Kolya and go to write term papers and essays for clients. Sleep came in snatches, a few hours at night and sometimes during the day with the children. We spun like squirrels in a wheel. There was no returning to my old job after maternity leave. The company had closed, and finding a new one was impossible. A worker with 2 small children was hardly the most desirable candidate. The children had gone to kindergarten twice each. Both immediately fell ill, so they didn't attend. And now the eldest was almost school-aged. He would bring infections home and infect the younger one, and so on in a cycle we'd already experienced. I had to make do with odd jobs and simple remote projects. This wasn't the happy life I'd imagined, was it? That's why my indignation knew no bounds when I found out my mother had bought a car. Not the most expensive, but certainly not cheap. The car cost about $1 million. She knew our situation, and instead of helping her daughter and grandchildren, she bought a car. When she came to visit, I didn't hesitate to tell her about it, but she was unyielding. I didn't force you to multiply at an accelerated rate. If it weren't for your long maternity leaves, your own savings, and the help your mother-in-law and I gave you, you would have managed without a mortgage. You would have bought an apartment and then had children. But you made your choice. Who's to blame? Now take responsibility for your actions. Especially since I already helped you, if you don't remember. And if you think I should spoon-feed you until the grave, you are mistaken. I told her that if she didn't care about her grandchildren's quality of life, she wouldn't see them anymore. My mother just shrugged and said that was my choice too. An unshakable woman. I believe she didn't even need the car. She just decided to rub my nose in the fact that she could afford such a thing, while I struggled, scraping pennies together. If my sons ever needed help, I would move heaven and earth for them. I would lay down my bones. Unlike their grandmother, the chasm between my mother and me widened into an abyss after that confrontation. It wasn't just the car, it was the casual cruelty of her words, the absolute lack of empathy for our struggle. Kolya tried to mediate to remind me that she had, in her own way, contributed to our down payment. But her contribution felt less like help and more like a transaction, a cold calculation that absolved her of any further emotional investment. His mother, on the other hand, became an unexpected ally. Perhaps seeing her own son and grandchildren struggling resonated more deeply with her, or perhaps she simply understood the unspoken code of maternal support better than my own mother. Life, however, had a way of demanding attention beyond family feuds. The mortgage payments were relentless, a monthly guillotine hanging over our heads. Kolya's second job, a grueling night shift at a warehouse, began to take its toll. His eyes, once bright with youthful ambition, now carried the permanent shadow of exhaustion. He'd come home in the early hours, smelling of dust and sweat, and collapse into bed, only to be woken a few hours later by the insistent cries of our youngest. I watched him, my heart aching, feeling the helplessness of our situation. My own freelance work, writing term papers and essays for university students, was a precarious lifeline. The pay was inconsistent, the deadlines brutal, and the subject matter often mind-numbingly dull. But it was money, and every ruble counted. I'd work late into the night, hunched over my laptop, the only sound the rhythmic breathing of my sleeping children in the next room. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in the dark screen, a gaunt, tired woman staring back, and wonder where the vibrant, hopeful girl I once was had gone. One evening, Kolya came home with a grim expression. "They're cutting shifts at the warehouse," he said, his voice flat. "My hours are being reduced. Significantly." The news hit me like a physical blow. We were already stretched to breaking point. "What are we going to do?" I whispered, the panic rising in my throat. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his arms strong but his body trembling slightly. "We'll figure it out, Anya. We always do." But even as he spoke the words, I could feel the tremor of fear in his voice, mirroring my own. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of our responsibilities pressing down on me. The children were growing, their needs expanding. School was on the horizon for our eldest, bringing with it new expenses. The thought of them going without, of denying them opportunities because of our financial constraints, was unbearable. I remembered my mother's words, "You made your choice." Had we truly chosen this life of perpetual struggle, or had circumstances simply conspired against us? The next morning, a new resolve hardened within me. We couldn't just survive, we had to thrive. I started researching, looking for more lucrative freelance opportunities, anything that could bring in a steady income. I stumbled upon an online platform that connected writers with businesses needing content, articles, blog posts, website copy. The pay was better, but the competition was fierce and the demands for quality were high. I spent hours honing my skills, studying SEO, learning about different writing styles. It was a steep learning curve, but I was desperate. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to build a client base. The work was demanding, often requiring me to write about topics I knew nothing about, but the money started to trickle in, then flow a little more steadily. It wasn't enough to replace Kolya's lost income entirely, but it was a significant supplement. We tightened our belts even further, cutting out every conceivable luxury. No more occasional treats for the children, no new clothes unless absolutely necessary. Every meal planned to maximize nutrition and minimize cost. Our lives became a meticulous spreadsheet of income and expenditure, every ruble accounted for. Kolya, seeing my efforts, redoubled his own. He started taking on odd jobs during the day, helping neighbors with repairs, driving for a ride-sharing service, anything to bring in extra cash. We rarely saw each other, passing like ships in the night, exchanging tired smiles and brief updates. Our conversations revolved around finances, children's schedules, and the never-ending list of things that needed to be done. The romance, the spontaneity, the easy laughter of our early years seemed to have evaporated under the relentless pressure. One day, our eldest son, Sasha, came home from kindergarten with a drawing. It was a colorful, childlike rendition of our family, Kolya, me, him, and his younger brother, Misha, all holding hands. But in the background, instead of our small apartment, he had drawn a sprawling house with a big garden and a swing set. "This is our new house, Mama," he announced proudly. "When we're rich." My heart clenched. He was only 6, but he understood in his innocent way the unspoken yearning for something more, something better. It fueled my determination. We had to give them that house, that garden, that swing set. We had to break free from this cycle of struggle. I continued to expand my freelance work, taking on more complex projects, negotiating higher rates. I learned to manage my time with ruthless efficiency, snatching moments to work during nap times, after the children were asleep, even during their bath time, dictating notes into my phone. The exhaustion was bone deep, a constant companion, but the thought of Sasha's drawing, of Misha's bright, curious eyes, kept me going. Then came the call from my mother-in-law. Her voice was hesitant, tinged with worry. "Anya, Kolya, he's not looking well. He's lost so much weight. He's always tired. I worry about him." I knew. I saw it every day. But what could we do? We